does it really mean to let go?
Letting go is no longer bringing the energy of the past into the present. When you change the way that you see yourself, you get this
I am Dr. Kristen Holmes. Meditation can transform your health and well-being. It has an amazing impact on your physiology, and no one understands the power of this better than young Pueblo.
I started having these strong emotions that I would try to run away from. The only way for me to run away from them at the time was to just fill myself with drugs and alcohol. In this moment of almost losing my life, I knew I don't want to die like this.
Being human is really hard.
If I felt anxiety coming up, instead of rolling up another joint, I realized, okay, these emotions, they suck. They're not great, but they're not as scary as I thought they were.
you just have to slow down.
It's hard to slow down.
I started meditating.
When you start healing the mind, that's an act of love. When you're meditating, what you're basically doing is, we often have a bad relationship with change.
We can change. We don't need to be the person we were yesterday.
That's when we can actually thrive.
I love that.
And what that means in your daily life is that
I believe that making positive changes in your life can sometimes start with even the smallest steps. By making the choice to subscribe to this channel, it's a step in the right direction. When I see those subscriber numbers go up, it makes me so happy because it shows that you are making a commitment to learn to live with more joy and more energy. Your support is truly appreciated. Thank you. Okay, let's get into today's episode. What got you into writing?
I started writing by accident. It was never the plan. I never foresaw that for myself. I actually thought I was going to have a long career in finance. But when I was in college, I started having these really strong emotions that stemmed from growing up in poverty when I was quite young. So the original story is, I moved to the United States with my parents when I was about 4 years old, quite young. We moved from Ecuador, and when we came to the United States, we actually moved to Boston. We struggled with just classic American poverty, and we got stuck in this poverty trap for, I think, over maybe like 15 years. It was just quite difficult until my brother and I grew up and were able to get jobs and, start adding to the amount of money that the family had. But during that time, even though my parents were together, my parents treated us well, there was this structure of, it almost felt like we were in a submarine that was going too far underground.
Yeah.
And the pressure was pushing into us where my parents were always trying to figure out how to pay the rent, how to put food in the fridge. And it was literally a constant struggle that would never end. It was a cycle, and they would share their frustrations with each other, and they would fight all the time. And it wasn't really out of because they didn't love each other or anything like that. It was just external pressure on the two of them.
Yeah.
And them trying to figure out what do we do? How do we survive? And being a young child and then a teenager and just seeing all of this, I thought it was normal, but then I didn't realize the way that was imprinting itself onto my mind, building this sort of scarcity mindset, this anxiety, this sadness. And then when I got to college, I just started having these strong emotions that I would try to run away from. And the only way for me to run away from them at the time was to just fill myself with drugs and alcohol. And it became this sort of terrible pattern that pushed me to being the unhealthiest I possibly ever could have gotten. And in this moment of almost losing my life because I had pushed my body to the edge where I was just, took too many drugs, drank too much, and felt like my heart was going to explode. In that rock bottom moment, I knew, okay, I don't want to die like this. I kept thinking about my parents. They kept popping up in my mind. I kept seeing, us when we were young, and I would see just how much they risked for a chance for my brother and I to live a better life. And I thought, I don't want to go out like this. I don't want to live this sort of selfish life where I'm running away from myself constantly. Let me try to make some serious changes. So I ended up putting the hard drugs away. A year later, I started meditating.
What was the moment? Because it's hard to break away.
Yeah.
You were using cocaine.
Yeah.
So we're talking hard drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
How,
Cocaine, different
what
pills,
was
like,
the moment that
mhm.
like you really were like, wow, I need to actually make a change here?
Oh yeah, it was in this rock bottom moment. So it was about a year after I had graduated from college, and
And you're making money at the time.
I was making a little bit of money at the time, not really. I was like trying to bounce around from different jobs, trying to find what I wanted to do. I like worked at a bank for about a month and a half and realized it wasn't quite the right fit. Um, and in this night of partying, I just felt like I was my insides were crashing. Like my heart was just felt like it was gonna explode. I was literally on the floor, crying, like just grabbing my chest, feeling like how erratic my heart was moving. Um, and that lasted for about 2 hours until it kind of calmed down. I was quite delicate for the week after. I talked to a doctor later, and she said after what I described to her sounded like a mild heart attack.
Wow.
And I knew in that rock bottom moment, literally on the floor, laying down, I felt like I can't continue. Like I can't do any more cocaine, can't do any more random pills, like whatever my friends have on them. I just have to basically say no to anything that could potentially take my life away.
Mhm.
And I also need to start telling myself the truth. I need to tell myself the truth about the emotions that I'm feeling. And the first truth was just, I don't feel good. Something's wrong. I don't feel good. So just admitting that was quite powerful.
Yeah, that is, I think that's that turning point,
Yeah.
that it's like that's kind of the crossroads. I think that everyone at some point in their life faces, where
Mm.
it's time to make a change,
Yeah.
and you say the word truth. I think it's so hard to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And I think I think one of the real traps of modernity is it's easy to be dishonest with yourself
Absolutely. I mean, we're constantly distracted.
constantly.
Yeah.
How do you cultivate a relationship with yourself where you can actually be truthful?
Yeah. It was interesting because if to me it felt very intuitive. It almost felt
Mm.
like intuitive healing where I first assessed like where was I going wrong?
Mm.
I was going wrong by treating my body like garbage. Like,
Yeah.
I was just eating as much as possible, never working out,
Mm.
never engaging with my emotions, doing hard drugs. So I thought to myself, okay, well, I need to start telling myself the truth, being really radically honest with myself,
Mm.
like not even necessarily with other people, just telling myself the truth. Um, and I need to start really just activating this like new habit building. So my thing was if my body's so weak, I need to start going on walks. I need to sign up to the gym. I need to drink water. I need to, even back then the superfoods were first starting to become popular, and I started taking like barley grass and these little things that were just like waking my body up.
Mm.
And to tell myself the truth, the basic thing that I practiced was when I felt a really strong emotion, this was before I even learned how to meditate, I would like, if I felt anxiety coming up, instead of rolling up another joint, I would challenge myself to sit on my bed and just feel my emotion, just not run away from it.
Mm.
No TV, no nothing, just like sit on the bed, feel the anxiety, feel the fear, whatever it was that was coming up. And then I got a lot of empowerment from that
Yeah.
because I realized, okay, these emotions, they suck. They're not great, but they're not as scary as I thought they were.
Let's talk about those hard emotions because I think the world that we live in today, it's really hard to slow down
Yeah.
and it's hard to be alone with our thoughts.
Mm.
I find that I have to really carve out very intentional time
Yeah.
where I'm not distracted by anything and that I kind of force myself into a place where I pay attention to my thoughts and my emotions and, kind of consciously bring myself to awareness of what is serving me and what isn't serving me. But how do we recognize whether or not we're giving ourselves enough space or time? Because I think a lot of folks might not even realize that that is actually at the root of why
Yeah.
they feel themselves stuck
Yeah.
in their life is that they're not really discerning what is important and what isn't important
Yeah.
and haven't actually built a practice to be able to even
Totally.
recognize that. So where does someone start?
Yeah, I think one thing is starting at a point where you're realizing that these quiet moments when you finally get time to yourself, you're not actually fully resting by watching a TV show or by
Mm,
scrolling on your phone.
right.
That's one thing that's pretty key because what you're getting is just light doses of pleasure, like
Yeah.
just sort of like this, not like high level, you know, heights of pleasure when there's moments of excitement, but it's more so like this low level of
Just like a
pleasure
little
where
drip
people,
of dopamine.
little drip, right?
Yeah. With no
And
effort.
exactly. And that is, it's fine to rest. It's fine to have, joy and do things that you like. And, I love watching TV shows too. And I also scroll, but having moments where you're just with yourself, when you're like, intentionally making your coffee, making your tea,
Mm,
going for a walk, like being out in nature or just, and these are all things even outside of meditating, when you're just sort of moving through life without any sort of external input outside of like
yeah.
what's normal and natural, like a tree
Right.
that's
Right.
real, as
Right.
opposed to like having a phone or another podcast in your ear.
Yeah.
But having little moments like this can help you tap into what you're immediately feeling and what
Yeah.
needs your attention.
Do you think, so I know for you, meditation has been that gateway,
Totally.
to just this incredible amount of presence. Talk a little bit about just your path to meditation. I mean, it's an
Mhm.
incredible story.
Yeah.
Um,
Meditating, it's been funny because I also never saw that coming. I was never like growing up. I've always been really interested in history and, knew about all these, different forms of meditating, but never really took to it. But one of my really, really close friends, who is someone that I partied a ton with in college,
wow.
um, he went and did a silent 10-day meditation course, a Vipassana course, out in India. And when he came back, I was shocked because, I know this guy, like I had already known him for about 4 or 5 years and, one of my closest friends. And he writes such a thoughtful email about love, compassion, and goodwill and how much this meditation course had affected him and opened him up to all these truths that he didn't know well.
Mm,
And I was really like struck by that. And then I ended up signing up to a course and I knew that whatever he had gotten, I needed some of that too. I was like, I don't really understand. I don't even know if I fully believe that you're different,
transformed.
but just enough. I was like, okay, let me go check it out for myself. I
It-
was in transition. So I got his email about maybe like 7, 8 months after my rock bottom moment.
yeah.
And
Wow.
I was still tender, but I was slowly getting stronger. I had probably lost a few pounds. I was feeling more like in my body. I was in motion. I was reconnecting with my family, even though, I was around my family, but I was started telling them more about how much I care about them. Like a
Mm,
lot of emotions were quiet for so long,
yeah.
where we were so stuck in just surviving that, I felt like I want to tell my mom and dad how much I appreciate them,
Yeah.
especially my dad. My dad worked so hard. And I got to that course. I got a ride there from some guy, and um, he was also in the course, and he was like sitting like 3 rows in front of me. And these are silent 10-day courses, and you're meditating multiple hours a day. We're talking like you can meditate upwards of 11 hours a day. I was doing the bare minimum because that was my like
It's so hard.
ability in that moment.
Mm,
And all I could think about was how could I run away? Because I was in this course and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it felt like I was, just trying to pick up a building with my arms. Like it was just so difficult to be there constantly with my own emotions.
wow.
There was no input. We're just doing the meditation practice, totally silent. And I found it challenging all the way up until day 8 when I finally, was really taking a good look at this guy who gave me a ride and trying to make sure, like, if he leaves, I need to go with him because I'm trying to,
stay? Do you want to leave?
and I can't even make eye contact with him because he's like, has his own room and all that. But I'm like over here looking at this guy trying to figure out if I can leave. And I saw, okay, he's staying, so that means I'm staying. And now all I can really do is put effort into it. And after the course was over, I felt like my mind was lighter than ever before. And I think that was the most shocking part, was that I went there not expecting too much, but the result was so big. And I knew that I was shocked because the result was so big, even though I knew I had not put in my utmost effort. Like I was doing the bare minimum. And I could feel that, like, the tension in my mind, the tumultuousness of my mind, the way that I was now aware of the way my emotions were moving, and how much easier it was to be gentle with people after that, like gentle with myself and with others. I was like, I need to sign up and go back because, one, I don't know how this works and I need more of it. So I ended up doing another 10-day course in September of 2012. So
Wow.
yeah, 2 months apart.
I mean, you effectively had to create kind of a new identity. And you talk about identity creation and lighter. And I think a lot of folks feel like who they are today is who they have to be tomorrow. But in fact,
yes.
your identity can shift, it can transform, it can change. In fact, a flexible identity, which is, I think, the exact terms you use, is such an important kind of sign of emotional maturity.
Totally.
So maybe just talk through what that dynamic looks like, because I think that's so important for folks to grasp, is that we can change.
Yeah.
We don't need to be the person we were yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think just that realization can be a source of great empowerment for folks.
It's so important to have a flexible sense of identity. And what that really comes from is understanding the way the universe moves. And our universe is one of impermanence. Like, everything is constantly changing and flowing forward. So that literally means at the highest cosmological levels, all the way to the most minute, tiniest subatomic levels, everything is in constant motion of change. To me, the way I envision this universe is just this giant river that's flowing forward. The river is never ever the same. It's constantly, becoming something new.
Yeah.
And what that means for us as human beings is that we often have a bad relationship with change.
Yeah.
We're trying to make ourselves
Hold
and
on.
our surroundings static. And that's just never going to work, right? To try to stand against this really powerful river and try to be there like a rock, like you're going to get knocked over.
Right.
So what can you do? Your only option is to flow forward with it. And what that means in your daily life and in your sense of identity is that your preferences are going to change. The way you like to show up in life, it's going to change. What your goals should be, it's all going to change. It's all very
Who you're hanging
conditional.
around with.
Who you're hanging around with, like what you want to do for work. I mean, there would be so many aspects of you that can change. And that really means not hanging on to labels in your mind, like, I am this. It's like, no, well, this is just happening in this current moment. It's this emotion is transitory. This, experience is transitory. So let me just keep ebbing and flowing with this river of the universe, as opposed to fighting against it.
Yeah. I love that. It takes awareness.
Yeah.
Back to the quiet moments, right? You said impermanence, that word impermanence, and just really embracing that is actually where you derive security. And you say those exact words in your book. One of the things that I've always struggled with is I've always felt like safety, in a sense, is kind of an illusion, and security is kind of an illusion. And a lot of that is probably my baggage from the past, but I've tried to overcome that with competency.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile that? I think, becoming competent is a way to feel safe and secure, but it's lacking some soul,
Yeah.
and how does someone reconcile kind of that, I think that tension?
It's so interesting because I find that the answer is in both of those things that you said. Like, it is, that it's a good thing to become competent, to try to, and enhance your capacity of what you can do,
Right.
like what you're good at, and doubling down on what you're good at and just getting better at it. And then being able to build this beautiful, harmonious life for yourself as much as you can. But at the same time, the way that this whole, world, universe works is that there are way too many factors that are outside of our control.
Right.
So how much security can you really get? You're not going to get security from attachment. You're just not. You can want everyone in your family to just be happy and healthy forever. And, one time my father and I had this long, serious talk where he was, having this difficult time where one family member was struggling a lot. And I was telling him, I'm like, Dad, like, this person, they're going to get better. But you have to understand that, like, we're a big family. Like, eventually someone else is going to be sick. Someone else is going to, something's going to happen to them. And that's kind of how life goes.
Yeah.
It's like, you just can't expect that all of these individuals are going to live forever and they're always going to be healthy and they're always going to have money and they're always going to be happy.
Right.
It's like, you can wish well for all beings, but there are going to be ups and downs. So that's why I don't try to put my security in external things. I try to put my security in the truth of impermanence so that when things do change in a way that I don't like, I also understand that this is not going to last forever. It's impermanent. So these good things that happen, I'm going to be even more present to enjoy them because I know that they're impermanent. Let me really be here with you. Let me not be on my phone. Let me just really focus these special moments that I have with my parents or with my wife. When we're all together, it's like, these are tender moments. Like I want to be there as fully as possible because like I've seen, enough in my life like that things don't always work out the way you want them to. So enjoy while you can. And then when things do happen that are quite challenging, you have that resilience of impermanence where it's like
that kind of reservoir of
totally
resilience.
Because you know that these things are going to change. So it's no storm in the history of the universe has ever lasted forever.
So the key is really cultivating a really strong sense of internal safety.
Yeah.
Which requires healing, which you talk a lot about what it means to heal, how to heal. And one of the paths to healing is through self-love.
Yeah.
So maybe if you can talk a little bit about what does that actually look like? How do you really love the self?
I think it's by really focusing on the fact that you really need to be able to take care of yourself. And not just in the actual care of like what does this mind and body need to really flourish, but care for yourself in a way where you are not an enemy to yourself. Like you are treating yourself well in your mind. You are turning that lens inward, looking at the entirety of your emotional history, and you see things that you like and things that you don't like.
Yeah.
And you're just accepting it for what it is. No longer fighting. It's like putting down the arms where like we are often fighting our past. We fight these memories, things that we don't like, things that are difficult, traumatic.
Yeah.
But there's so much beauty and power in just accepting and being like, yes, this was a difficult thing. I don't like that this happened. If there was an opportunity, I would change it. But there isn't that opportunity. So let me just embrace the truth of who I am in this moment. And that's an act of love to just fully accept yourself as you are, the imperfect person that you are. And then that helps you move forward. It helps you move forward into transformation.
Yeah.
Change the things that you can change. Treat yourself better. Surround yourself with good people. And you'll start noticing this really beautiful thing about self-love when you start really paying attention to your inner landscape and seeing the way your emotions, the way they fluctuate, the way that you struggle. You start developing this compassion. And this is where I think it's really important for the wellness world to understand is that true self-love will start opening the door to unconditional love for all people. Because if you're really loving yourself and it's just you, then that's selfishness. But if you're really loving yourself and others as well, while of course still maintaining boundaries and all these things that are properly protective.
Right.
But when you're really, truly enhancing that self-love, it just helps you look at people with gentler eyes and more compassionate eyes. And you know that they're struggling just like you. So why not be kind to them?
And you're scaling compassion through Wisdom Ventures.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk for a second about what that
Totally,
means? Because I think that path to self-love is being first compassionate with yourself and then, but I also compassionate with the people around you, knowing that like being human is really hard.
Yeah,
and we should be lifting each other up.
totally. Totally. It's interesting because Wisdom Ventures was like, it almost feels like a different way to be creative. Like I really like writing because it feels like this creative like venue where I can just, share the things that I reflect on. And it's been really, to me, it feels really important to impact a lot of people well. I don't really care about being famous. I don't need my face to be famous or anything like that. I don't care about, ever being a celebrity, but I do care about impact. And when the opportunity came to be a part of Wisdom Ventures as a co-founder, I like jumped to it because I had always had this interest in the business world, but I wasn't quite ready for it because I needed to do my own healing. And through my healing, that activated my creativity. That's when I started writing, and I was like shocked by it. But then because of the writing, I got invited to all these different cool conferences and met these amazing people. And what ended up happening was the founder of Wisdom 2.0, this fantastic conference out in the West Coast, he wanted to come up with this, like, how can we take capital and put it into companies that are going to make a profit, but are also like their mission is to help people in different ways. And we gathered a bunch of, it's 6 of us co-founders and partners, and it's just a fantastic group of people. And we've invested in over 34 companies. Wow. We raised a fund that's about 10 million. We're working on raising a new fund right now. It's going to be 75 million. And it's been just incredible work. And it's, literally working with small startups that are doing fantastic work to, big companies like Anthropic. So there's a bunch of ways to be able to scale compassion.
I love that. When I read about that, and I think why I wanted to connect that to self-love is that I think when people start to, your own journey, like when you really started to truly love yourself, it opened up this compassion for yourself and for others, and it drives you toward opportunity, and you end up connecting with people that creates more opportunity. It's kind of like this amazing virtuous cycle, and it starts with like loving the self.
When you change like the way that you see yourself, and you start really accepting and loving yourself, you get this like new energy, and it's super attractive to other people. Right? Like people want to work with you. They want to build something together. They and a lot of it too is like when you start healing the mind and you start doing that deconditioning process, you get super creative. It doesn't matter if you're a writer or not. Like in whatever work that you do is you start looking at life and you're like, okay, I see these old problems, but these new solutions are connecting, and I'm going to act on them and make them real.
I love that. Is there anything else you want to tell us about meditation? I couldn't believe the statistic that there are a lot of folks in the world who meditate. It's something like 200 to 300 million folks.
Oh yeah, and it's going to become more.
And it's going to become more.
It's going to become a lot more.
Yeah.
I was talking to a few friends about it, and there's so many different meditation traditions.
Right, and your practice is
I practice in the Goenka tradition, but you look at all the traditions, they all look like they're growing. You know, like they're all like getting more students. The wait lists are longer, and people need different techniques because you want to find something that meets your mind where it's at. And there's some techniques are harder than others and all that, so you've really got to find something that suits you. But I have this feeling that by the time that I'm like 50, 60, 70, I feel like there are going to be so many people that are so rooted in their mental health and so rooted in like that they know and are practicing things that they found to be good for them. So the same way where it's become more popular to care about your fitness, and people, are super into strength training or running, or they have their thing. I think it's going to be really similar where people are like, what style of meditating do you do?
Right.
And people will tell you, and it's just going to become part of the common culture.
I love that. That sounds like I feel really hopeful hearing that.
That's one of the things that gives me the hope, like the most hope, because the world is wild. It's so wild, and
Crazy.
It's changing so fast, and things, look
biology and quantum computers and
Quantum
I'm
computers,
just
yeah,
like
Willow,
my
all
head
this
is
stuff.
just spinning all the time.
It's it feels intense how much the world is changing and how dangerous it looks at times. But what gives me hope is that we live in a moment that's quite different historically from others, where we live in this globalized world and we have access to all these incredible Western modalities and Eastern modalities that have become, like you can find different ways to meditate and different therapy practices
Right.
in Singapore and in Boston.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like anywhere in the world, if you live around or near a major city, like you can get access to a lot.
Yeah.
And
True.
I think that's pretty powerful that in this like chaotic moment, we can develop more internal peace, more self-awareness, more creativity, and more compassion for ourselves and others. And my hope is that those people who become more rooted in this, strong self-awareness,
Yeah.
that they can bring that creativity into their work, into the politicians that they support or whatever it is, in the way that they want to mold and redesign the world to just be a better place for all of us.
Let's take a second to talk about Whoop, a sponsor of this show, where I work as the global head of human performance, principal scientist. Across January, we ran a campaign called January Jumpstart to help our members build plans for 2025. Our January Jumpstart campaign aimed to really inspire folks to choose from one of the 5 tracks. Across these 5 tracks, we saw our members improve, which was so cool to see. Behavior change, of course, does not stop on January 31st. It is a 24/7, 365-day-a-year mission. It is about just small, consistent change every single day. So keep motivated and hold yourself accountable with Whoop. With features like Whoop Coach, weekly plans, and trends, you can better understand your health and how your actions can work to improve it. If you'd like to experience the power of behavior change, head to join.whoop.com/science to sign up for 1 month free trial. As a scientist, I'm deeply committed to working with companies that rigorously test their products, which is why you're hearing me talk about my new show sponsor, Huel. Their range is formulated by registered nutritionists, third-party tested, and I can assure you, it all tastes really good. I've been so impressed. I recently decided to join their science advisory board. On especially busy days, usually when I'm traveling, it can be super hard to hit my macronutrient targets. Huel truly helps me stay on track. It's packed with 27 vitamins and minerals, and I'm just so grateful to join a brand that is trusted by people like you and backed by scientists like me. If you'd like to try the world's .1 complete nutrition brand, you can find it at GNC stores nationwide or at huel.com/Kristen. That's HUEL.com/Kristen.
What would you say, if someone starts down this path of kind of renewed self-awareness, honesty with the self, how do we know, what can we expect to see in ourselves when, that would give us indication that we're creating a better relationship with ourselves? What is kind of the litmus test?
Yeah, I think
for
one of the
that?
first things you see is that your preferences start changing. And your preferences about not just what you want to put into your mind and body, like the food that you eat and the, what you're consuming through the internet, but also like what you want to do for work. I think that happens to us a lot when you start growing and healing. A lot of us I was the perfect example. I grew up really poor, so I thought, and I'm, growing up watching TV, and I see that finance makes money. So I'm like, okay, I need money, so I need to go into finance. But then a lot of us kind of just take in what society tells us is good. But then when we start our path, we're like, oh, actually, I want to do something quite different. And I think a mixture of a subtle shift in your friendships or making new friends that are more aligned to the way that you want to develop, changing your preferences. And I think the biggest example that your growth is really changing your mind is that you are just not reacting to the past the same way as before. So whenever whenever something difficult would come up, and you're like, the reaction's still there, but it's not as intense as it used to be, then you've changed a lot.
Like you don't revert to that old cycle.
You don't
like
revert
something
to
bad
who you were
happens, you go to the
before.
pantry and you start like binging
Exactly.
food. You know, like when you don't do that anymore, you know that
Right.
you've actually grown.
And the thing about it too is like the intention, in that moment where something's quite difficult, you can feel that tension.
Yeah.
And that emotion may still come up, like the anxiety or whatnot may still be there, but it's not as intense as it used to be.
Right.
And you have a little more clarity in there. That's powerful.
What would you recommend for extroverts in terms of alone time? And, you know, you talk in Lighter, you talk a lot about being alone and healing yourself is how the experience of being alone changes. Maybe say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I think I'm a very extroverted person. Like I love hanging out. Like I love being with people. I love joking around. I love, going to just like being around people. And my wife is the opposite. She loves being alone. Like I'm lucky that she allows me to be near her because she's just like totally fine in her solitude. I found that because I was such an extroverted person, I was using people to run away from myself.
Yeah.
I was like using those interactions and like, all the jokes and all the talking and all that to just the same way that I was using, drugs and alcohol. It was just like, I remember literally in those moments when I was in college and I would feel tension come up and it was daytime. It was not time to party. So I was like, I have to be around people. Like I need to get myself around people and like, obviously take this, in a balanced manner because we're human beings. We're communal beings. Like we have to be around each other because that's how we thrive. But there is this value of solitude where who are you when you are alone? What do you feel like when you're alone? And are you okay with just being? I think building up that quality will actually make the moments that you are with other people much more authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, we touched on it very briefly, radical honesty.
Yeah.
And I love that phraseology. Maybe just talk a little bit about what does that actually look like in action, and how does that have the potential to transform our relationship with ourselves and potentially with others?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because radical honesty is one of those terms that, people define it in different ways. And when I talk about it, I like to talk about it as this is radical honesty between you and yourself.
Yeah.
Not necessarily between you and other people. It's good to be, truthful with people, but it's so important for there not to be lies inside of you that are creating distance between you and yourself. Like, because all the things that you're lying to yourself about, the things that you're suppressing, they create distance between you and yourself. And that distance is just tension.
Yeah.
So
you can't possibly be honest with other people in your life if you're not honest with yourself, right?
Totally. So this is all rooted in because the way you are with yourself is going to vibrate outward into how you show up with other people. So when you start telling yourself more and more of that truth and you are able to face it, whether it's good or bad or challenging, you can just build that resilience so that when you have these challenging moments with other people, or even even telling someone that you love them can feel challenging, but you're building that resilience to just, to be like, it's okay. Even though this is hard, I'm doing it and it's good.
One of the things that I think we struggle with as humans is, we want to please others, right? And I think there are all these inputs from other people on how we should live our lives.
Yeah.
And this is, definitely, I've got 2 teenagers, so I think a lot about not imposing my will or, on them and really letting them figure out things for themselves. And, but I think it's hard to not allow other people's opinions to inform you, right?
Yeah.
And what is the connection between that and radical honesty? I feel like there has to be some sort of thread that's really important there.
I think it's important to know that like whatever you're consuming is affecting your mindset.
Right.
It's affecting your mindset, and
And who
it's
you are and how you think.
totally.
And
My wife
yeah.
was just telling me, she was like that her goal for next year is to not slip into any fads. Like she knows what's good for her health.
Yeah.
She knows what she needs to do.
Yeah.
Like she's done a lot of learning. She is a scientist. But it's tricky because we live in this like world of marketing, and there are so many different fads, and like all of a sudden, this new thing becomes hyper important. It's the most best thing that you can do for your health. And sometimes it just comes down to the simple things like eating whole foods, sleeping well, getting sunlight,
Getting outside.
and like moving your body.
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't want any more fads, like because they affect your mind, and then they make you doubt yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the tricky thing of like asking yourself the truth about, where is this coming from?
Right.
Is this real, or is someone putting this into your head?
Yeah.
And like that can be your radical honesty.
Yeah, I love that. You said something really beautiful. You said the greatest gift you can give your partner is a continuous commitment to their own healing.
Yeah. And I mean, my wife and I found that to be really true. And I think that's the crux of my next book that's coming out, How to Love Better.
That's coming out soon. It's in March.
It's coming out in March. And
so exciting.
I'm thrilled about it because it's like this, not only like as a writer, do I feel like I've learned a lot about writing and how to make myself clearer, how to better connect with the audience, but it really is the culmination of my own experience and everything that I've been learning from meditating, where, Lighter was a book that was much more about the individual and how you can take this transformation journey. But How to Love Better is what happens when you take that transformation journey, and then how does that change your relationships?
Yeah.
Like, because I've seen it happen directly. Like as soon as I started meditating, as soon as I started putting more time into really being aware of what's happening inside, I was better able to show up in my relationship with my wife. Like our relationship, before we both started meditating, was incredibly rocky. We were together for 6 years, and we'd be together for a while, break up, be together again, break up again. And it was this like push and pull where we loved each other, but we did not know how to care for each other. And we did not have enough emotional maturity as individuals to be able to hold our arguments, to be able to hold like, how do we even process this? And it was difficult because there was so much love, but we didn't know how to hold each other. And it wasn't until we started meditating where it became aware, we both started realizing that what's missing is our own self-awareness. And as soon as we started building our own self-awareness, like this new sort of gentleness started appearing into our relationship that started making things better over time.
Oh, I love that. I heard this quote once, desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want.
Yeah.
And it made me think, when I was reading about craving and emotional maturity, it made me think of that quote.
Oh yeah.
And just this idea that, I've been really, it's one of the things that I do my mindfulness walks, just thinking about desire, and trying to limit my desire, try not to have fuzzy desires.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that ties into craving in a way, in a really, I think, direct manner. And yeah, I'd love. How do we kind of limit our cravings? Is that, and what's the path there?
I love that you're using that word craving, right? Because there's an interesting thing that happened when the Buddha's teaching started being translated into English, and that word started getting translated as, like desire as a root of suffering. And it could also be understood as craving as the root of suffering. And there is a subtle difference between the two, because it's good for you to have goals. Right. If you can want things in a balanced way, where, you have an idea, an ambition, and you're moving towards a particular direction, that's good. That's very human. That's like a normal thing to do. It's very different when you're craving something, because you're combining desire with tension.
Right.
And you're getting very attached to this thing that you want.
Yeah. And the motivation's very different for the two.
Totally. It's much more selfish.
Yeah.
And it's also very just like rooted in struggle.
Right.
Where like the moment that you start deeply craving something, in that moment, you are already suffering.
Right.
Because your mind is just rolling with tension.
Totally.
And then in the process of you trying to get what you want, you're still struggling.
Mhm.
And it's very different from you.
And you're unhappy, to be clear,
you're
until you
unhappy.
get what you want.
And then you get the thing that you wanted, and you're still unhappy, and you're already moving on to the next craving.
Yeah.
So when you're
I
living,
spent so much of my life in that vortex. I can't even tell you.
no, same, and we all do, and it's very different from that subtle shift into having a goal and then working towards something, putting energy into it, and then you know that it's just a goal when you don't get what you want, and you're okay, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm all right, but you know what? I didn't get what I wanted. Let me go back to the drawing board. Let me re-strategize. Let me figure out what I can do better without necessarily being upset, or, there's no sort of like tension in it. And I think that's the way I've been sort of training myself to live my life. It's like, let me have goals. It's good to be ambitious, but let me not slip into craving, because like I can be happy in the process. I can be happy in the original moment where I'm coming up with a goal. I can still be happy with who I am right now and what has been accomplished before. So I don't like put my happiness into the future like that.
It's so funny. I had to give up on goals entirely.
Yeah.
Like I can't even, I just, my only focus is just to live my values.
Oh,
and
that's
let that
great.
guide
Yeah.
my decisions and kind of how I structure my time and my thinking and my relationships. And because I just would get into this really
Yeah.
unhealthy kind of relationship.
Would you take up too many goals, or what would you do?
Yes. And it's my motivation was
Yeah.
always unpure. It
Yeah.
was like this craving an accolade or
Yeah.
like this kind of
Oh,
end
yeah,
state.
yeah.
It kind of like
Yeah.
created a very unpure motivation, I guess, that I knew in my heart. I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? This doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to break myself out of that
Ah.
other than being like, all right, you know what? I'm going to actually not have goals.
Yeah.
And I'm really just
love
going to
that.
think about like my
Yeah.
values and how,
Yeah.
how do I can design a life where I can like literally live my values of growth and impact and peace. And what is that? And then backing up, be like, okay, what does that actually look like in action? And how do I move around the world? And,
Yeah.
what are the things that I think about and pursue? And how do I just construct my day? And, I kind of backed into that way. But yeah, it's one of those things that
That's really powerful,
taken
because
me years.
I was making a similar mistake. And I was like making too many goals for myself. And then I realized what was smart was to just pick one thing.
Yeah.
Just like to pick one thing that I really wanted to put energy into.
Mhm.
And I don't even know if I would even call it a goal, but it was like, this is my focus.
Yeah.
And I had these years where, I had been sampling meditation, and not necessarily sampling, but like I would go to these courses, I would go away for 10 days, and I was struggling to bring it back home and meditate, daily. And then I had this like year where I was like, this is what I'm going to do. This is the year where I make it happen.
I love it.
And I put energy into it, and it worked. I started meditating 2 hours a day, and I've been doing that now for like 9 or almost 10 years.
So you do an hour in the morning
Hour
and
in
an
the
hour at
morning.
night.
Yeah, hour before I came here to see you.
It's
And
incredible.
An hour.
You just must be like, like I can feel you have an aura of peace,
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
there's
Yeah.
no, like it's not by
Yeah.
accident, is it?
I mean, I'm happy to be here. We're creating that environment
Oh.
together. But it took a while to be able to, I had a bunch of false starts before I could actually start meditating daily. And once I was able to like really make these 2 pillars of my day firmly in the ground, where, I'm meditating an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. And I was like, okay, what do I do next? So I was like, well, I don't want to smoke marijuana anymore, and I don't want to drink any more alcohol. Because I stopped all the hard drugs, and I, still drank and smoked, not as much as before, much more lightly, but I realized that I didn't want to at all.
Wow. What year was this?
This was 2015.
Okay. Wow. So
Yeah.
it's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah.
Wow.
But the challenging part wasn't so much like the stopping the alcohol and the smoking marijuana. It was much more challenging to like reformat what culture looked like for me, right? Because so much of culture with like hanging out with your friends is very ritualistic.
All right. Letting go. Okay. You mentioned, you had to kind of let go or maybe create new boundaries with friends who are still kind of drinking and smoking. What does it really mean to to let go? Because that's very hard and
Yeah,
kind of abstract.
I put this really simple definition to it. I think letting go is no longer bringing the energy of the past into the present. So trying to come back to whatever is happening now. And,
What's an example of bringing a past energy to the present? And how do you, again, we go back to self-awareness and self-love, being able to recognize those moments where, oh, wait, this is not serving me. This is an old version.
Yeah. I think a lot of it happens in moments where, someone says something that I don't necessarily agree with, or, someone says something about I remember when I was younger, I was like really vocal about my political views, especially when I was a teenager and in my 20s. And whenever I would hear something that I would disagree with, even if it was somebody who was like on my side, my first reaction was to tell my view and just try to see if they would agree with me. And I think something about that was really coming from a sort of like a trauma-oriented place, where it's like, this doesn't feel safe. Can we all just agree? Right. And now whenever—
just trying to get consensus.
It's consensus, right?
Yeah.
But now when I'm moving through life, I found it I know what my views are.
Right.
But I don't know if I need to say them all the time.
Yeah.
And also if I come across someone who has different views from me, I don't want to tell them they're wrong. I actually want to hear more. Tell me why. Tell me more. And just ask questions.
Be curious.
And be curious about where they're coming from. And it's been really interesting also too, detaching what a human being is from political viewpoints, because human beings who have very different political viewpoints than you can be fantastic human beings, amazing people. Will not vote the same way that you vote. And I think that's something that we need to remember.
Yeah.
Because we forget that so quickly, and we have
such a good point.
The mind loves to create enemies and whatnot, but that's been a personally for me, to let go. When I hear something I don't agree with, I'm like, cool. Let me actually hear more, because I also might be wrong, right? I'm not necessarily right. I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
But that's been a nice way where I literally will feel the impulse of the past, and I'm like, no, it's cool. You're safe. Let's ask questions.
I want to talk about attachments a little bit, in the context of kind of letting go, and maybe in the context of relationships.
Sure.
I think about attachments kind of in two, or evaluate them in kind of two buckets. The really rigid attachments, and the really kind of fluid attachments. And I've been really trying to think, and I think the latter is the healthier, the more the fluid, the better, right? Because that allows space to grow and to change. But those are actually really rare because of the way society is constructed.
Mm-hmm.
Can you break that down a little bit for us? Because I just think that's important. I've been finding it really important to kind of think about my relationships in that context. Do I have the space to grow? Am I giving the person space to grow?
Totally.
How do you think about that?
It's really interesting, and this is a big topic in How to Love Better, where I talk about attachments as the wall that we need to get through to be able to love someone really well, because attachments they kind of set us up for failure, especially these rigid attachments that you were talking about, where I am demanding that this person exists in this particular way, and that doesn't give an individual the space that they need to really flourish and grow and evolve and become whoever, to move in a direction that's best for them. Attachments are so tricky because, going back to that conversation of safety, we think we're getting safety from attachments, but what we're really doing is pushing people away. We're doubling down on control, and because that's how attachments manifest as control in daily life.
Right.
And when we become overly controlling, people can't breathe. They don't have space.
Yeah.
And in a relationship, it's supposed to be about mutual agreement where sometimes you pick the TV show and sometimes I'll pick the TV show.
Yeah.
Sometimes you pick what's for dinner and I'll pick what's for dinner.
Yeah.
And having this shared leadership as opposed to this my way or the highway.
Yeah.
And I think what we really need to understand is that relationships that are long lasting, relationships that where both people really feel held, are relationships that are based on commitment, because commitment sort of gets rid of that trap of expectations, where if I'm making these silent expectations upon you, where I'm expecting you to fulfill these needs and you might not even be aware of them fully.
Yeah.
And that kind of sets you up also for failure. But instead, if I'm like vocal and honest and authentic with you about letting you know, like, this is the way I like my happiness to be supported, and you also tell me the way you like your happiness to be supported, then from my own volition, I can say, oh, these are things that I can do for you,
Yeah.
and vice
It
versa.
allows for that
Exactly.
validity.
And then
Yeah.
we're coming together in the middle and we're connecting on, okay, now let's figure out what our commitments are to each other.
Yeah.
And then that's the bond that's keeping our relationship together. And then we can continue being, evolving, changing individuals, because that's how we're meant to exist.
Yeah. We talk, I think a lot in Western culture about, just, lifting and running and, kind
Yeah.
of taking care of the body.
Yeah.
But, it's very clear that we need to be training and taking care of our mind as well. For someone who's totally new to the mind, where do you think would be the best place for them to start, kind of cultivating a self-awareness?
Yeah, I think the best place to start is what we mentioned earlier, where it's really valuable for you to just be aware of how your emotions are moving in the day.
Okay.
Like just simply being aware that, I feel good right now, I feel capable, or my emotions are down, or jealousy is moving through, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's so many different emotions, but just at least checking in like 3 times a day, like,
Yeah.
where am I in this wide emotional spectrum?
Yeah.
Because that'll give you a ton of information about how to move forward.
So maybe even like before breakfast, after breakfast, like almost like journal, just write down your your emotions.
You can just write it down, or you can
Or just think about it, yeah.
just be aware. And what's nice about it though is like is if you're in proximity to someone that you care about, then letting them know where you are, because then you know and they know. And the other aspect is like, if you're really trying to engage with the inner worlds, like I've seen so many people become different human beings after they've worked with a really good therapist.
Yeah.
I've also seen people evolve very quickly when they start meditating.
Yeah.
So I think you have to check in with your own threshold about like what feels good to you, like what is connecting with your intuition. Like I went to go meditate in this particular tradition because as soon as I heard about it, my intuition was like, you got to go and you got to go quick. Like that is for you.
Yeah.
And I think because there are so many different modalities out there these days, I think everyone will have that with something.
Yeah. And you practice Vipassana.
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 Yeah, in the Guanga tradition.
In the Guanga tradition, okay. What are features of really wise people?
Oh, that's a great question. You made me excited asking it. A feature of really wise people. So there's 2 people that I know that are super, super wise. They're not afraid of death at all. Like at all. And it's
Wow.
I
did not expect for you to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, they're so I've been thinking about one of my teachers, Barry Lapping. He's been meditating since he was 24 and he's now 76.
Wow.
He's just meditated a ton. Probably like if I would give it a
I'd love to just look at his brain.
If I would give it
Probably
a rough
looks really
estimate, yeah, I mean, he's like, his energy, like physically and mentally, is incredible. It's like you would not even believe he's 76. But he's probably meditated, I would say, like roughly estimated, probably like 50,000 hours. Because I did a rough estimate of my own. I'm like around 13,000 hours.
Wow.
And just because I'm younger. But so when, I've had so many conversations with him, and he knows he's 76, and he's like, yeah, Diego, like I'm not always going to be around. And we talk about the future of the tradition that we meditate in, and what meditating will look like in 2050 and whatnot. And anytime he talks about a moment where he knows he's not going to be around, there is no fear at all. And a lot of that is based on his, more deepened understanding that this sense of self it's not everything. It's not fully real. And it's not like
Wow.
this is what I am. And also
That takes the
because
pressure off.
yeah, it really takes the
You
pressure
know?
off. Totally. And I think another sort of like a big quality that really, really wise people have is when you look in their eyes, there's only compassion. Like
Mm.
you can feel when you're in their energy, they don't want to hurt you.
Mm.
They only want to help.
Mm.
And their sense of self is almost non-existent, where it's like their ego is just like tiny, and you can like feel it because they're just, they don't really spend any time praising themselves or,
Wow.
saying what they've accomplished or anything like that. They're just moving in service. And it's awesome. It's awesome being around people like that.
If you were, having gone on so many retreats, what would you recommend for a beginner who maybe doesn't have a lot of time? They might not be able to do a 45-day retreat. Like what do you think
Yeah.
is the minimum effective dose of
Yeah, it's a good question. It's so it's really gradual, right? Like I started
Yeah.
with 10-day retreats and I
that
did
sounds like an
yeah.
eternity though.
Yeah, even that, that's a long period of time. And then after I did a bunch of 10-day retreats, I did my first 20-day retreat, and then I did
Wow.
a few 30-day retreats, and then I did a 45-day, and I've done a few 45 days now. But I would say, especially if you're interested in meditating, like if you're interested in what I've been talking about, then I think you can go ahead and do I had meditated once for 20 minutes before I did a silent 10-day meditation retreat. So I had
Oh,
no experience.
okay.
I actually think in some ways it's better that you don't even have that much
Yeah, because you don't have
meditating
any of that
experience.
like
Yeah,
weird habits around it.
totally. And you're not like some people who know a lot of different meditation techniques that sort of struggle to just do the instructions that you're
Mm.
given. But if that's interesting to you, you can go check it out at dhamma.org, dhamma.org. But then there's a lot of other traditions. There are places where you can go on a retreat for like 2 days,
Yeah.
or 1 day, or
Yeah.
half a day, or
Right.
5 days. I've heard of a lot of 5-day courses.
Nice.
And I think that's fantastic because in either way, what is meditating? Meditating is you're literally taking yourself to the mental gym.
Yeah.
Like you're taking yourself to the mental gym, and what muscles are you developing? You're developing the muscles of awareness, non-reaction, and compassion. Like especially in the tradition that I, meditate in,
Mhm.
that's what we focus on. And we have those qualities in the mind, but they're just not that strong. So you have to put time in to make them stronger.
I love that. That feels so empowering,
Yeah.
and realistic, like it seems possible. It's exciting. Final question, Diego.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be human?
Oh, to be like utterly imperfect and to be okay with it. I think that's like, to really live your human life in a way that you know you're going to make mistakes, but as long as you're open to learning from them and not being hard on yourself, it just makes that whole journey of transformation smoother. And once you really start learning, like, okay, this is a trial and error process. Now let me use it for my evolution.
Mm.
Like that's when you start leaning into your ability to really fully thrive. But I love, we're all imperfect.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
I love that. Well, I can't tell you how fun this conversation has been for me, and how grateful I am for all the work.
And thank you
for today.
so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
so
great.
grateful.
I'm an individual who believes in living my core values, but it can be a challenge sometimes when there are a lot of demands on my time. Life lately has felt especially busy between meetings and research, book writing, live talks, self-care and family time, my days are already really busy. Then I added a podcast and things started to feel, well, a little out of balance, which is why you're hearing me talk about my new show sponsor. Fiverr is a virtual assistant who's legitimately helped me reclaim my time and my peace. Fiverr is the marketplace where thousands of skilled freelancers are ready to meet your business or personal needs. Browse portfolios to find someone whose expertise, skills, and budget aligns with yours. It's literally that simple. If you're looking to free up time in your life, head to fiverr.com or click the link in the description and use code Kristen, Kristen, at checkout for 10% off your first hire. That's Fiverr.com.